Good men are not what the moment requires. Right now, the time calls for dark men to do dark things.
I'm here to set you free.
There are no paths between lions and men.
You may just be my new best friend.
Very old friend.
I wouldn't say friends.
Let us pledge that the winner will allow the loser all the proper funeral rituals.
Totally did, right?
No.
Now you know who you're fighting.
The king in the north!
You're in my dream.
Oh, sunshine, you make me happy when the skies are
Did it
gray.
ever once occur to you that I might have some insight?
What should I do differently?
I don't know. I don't know anything about battles.
That's good advice.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.
Your kingdom, your throne.
All I have ever wanted was to marry a man for love. Now I have no choice.
God put my Henry on the throne.
What's going on, everybody? It's Justin Thomas. Welcome to the Justin Thomas Show. We are going to be talking about the White Princess today, and we are going to be discussing a few ways that it could turn out to be a good show after all. I put together some historical events that I am almost positive they're going to cover, and we're going to hope for the best. We're about a day away from the second episode, and since I didn't give it such a good review the first time, I'm hoping to give it a good review for episode 2, so this is the way I think that can happen.
You're listening to the broadcast on the Focalizer Network, the only show that covers all your favorite fandoms, with your host, Justin Thomas.
So we're going to dive right into it, and obviously I didn't have a lot of pleasant things to say about the White Princess in the first cast. As I said, if you haven't listened to it, please at least go and give it a quick listen. It's only about 20 minutes long. But I am hoping, and I truly mean this, that this series is going to end up being a lot better than I predicted, and I hope that I'm wrong. And I mean that because I was a huge fan of the White Princess, and I was looking forward to this from the time I heard it was finally going into production. And they had backstepped this a little bit when it was in talks, and I think that it's because they're obviously not oblivious, as I'm not oblivious, to the obvious hurdles this series would face leading to its premiere. If you haven't heard my first cast, like I said, I do mention a lot about this period and about how it could be considered rather dull compared to the White Queen, which takes place at the height of the War of the Roses. As a historical enthusiast, I really still find this time very interesting, but there's not as many battles. There's a lot of just in-court politics, but since it is a day before episode 2 is about to air, I'm trying to find a few historical events that I feel they're going to cover. This first one I'm going to talk about, I know they're going to cover, because I've set it up in the first series. They do it in the books, and we open the first episode with it. So, and when I say that it's not as eventful, I mean that just for base watchers that are maybe looking for something to fill the time of Game of Thrones, since the War of the Roses has been a lot more prevalent, at least amongst my generation, because I believe Game of Thrones. I've always been in history, but a lot of people have gotten into looking into what inspired George and stuff like that, and I think that's great. That's why I do podcasts on shows like this. Nothing wrong with that. But the first event that I'm going to talk about is actually something that I believe, if you've read the series of Song of Ice and Fire, also inspired George, and that is The Princess in the Tower. And if you're aware of Aegon, I believe his story definitely is resemblant of Richard, one of the princes that we see was not ever put in the tower, and it was a changeling. The White Queen brings this up. They do it in Philippa Gregory's book as well. And this happened to a point in history. We are never sure about the fates of these two children of Edward V of England, and it would be Richard, the Duke of York. The two brothers were the sons of Edward of York and Elizabeth Woodville, aka the White Queen, and they survived their father's death in 1483. At this time, they were only 12 and 9. Respectively, they were lodged in the Tower of London by Richard III. This is only 48 hours after his death, where we pick up in The White Princess. Richard was appointed by Edward as the Lord Protector at the time. And the Lord Protector is usually instated when there is a heir that is not yet of age, and he is supposed to keep peace within the kingdom and usher in the monarch's reign and be sort of a mentor. So these two children go to the tower. Obviously, in the series, we know that one of them for sure doesn't go, and he is a changeling. In history, that we don't know what happens for sure, but this is a highly believed theory. There's a few different theories on this. Either Richard killed them, which we see in the show, at least for the fictional story we're watching, that's not the case. It's highly likely in real life that Henry killed them as well. Henry Tudor, the king we see right now, or that this man that emerges named Perkin Warbeck that claimed to be Richard, Duke of York. He supposedly escaped to Flanders. Warbeck's claim was actually supported by some contemporaries, including the aunt of the disappeared Princess Margaret of York. And this appears both in the book and in the show, and it's an aspect of history. We never know what happened. We never know what happened to those two children. They could have went to the tower and been executed immediately. We don't know. They could have been executed by Henry VII, the king we see now. Our situation similar to the one we're seeing play out in the show could be happening. And they start off this series with Richard being in the first scene when Henry's men are coming, because this, again, is 48 hours after Bosworth. We see the White Queen, who is now played by Essie Davis. And I won't be discussing the acting in this podcast. This is just going to be a short one about some events I really think they can utilize. There's not a lot of them, but I think they can really do something with it and turn it around. And I'm hoping that the acting was just off, and that was just my opinion, and hopefully it won't be justified. I'm actually hoping to be wrong. So we're just going to act like the acting is going to be good. And they could really utilize this because they obviously are heavily relying on this. This seems to be right up there with the main arc, which is obviously the relationship between Lizzie and Henry, which that can be enough for a lot of people. That can be enough for me. The internal issues at court could be enough for me, but I'm not oblivious to the fact that people want to see some action. So I think there's two things that bring some action. These real life inspired events of Richard coming back and staking a claim. We already see Plantagenets and Earl of Warwick at court, which are not friends of Henry's, and they do cause him trouble in real life. So I think that this could be really interesting, especially if we are to see a time jump. I know we're going to see the birth of Arthur in this, so I think we could see a reemergence of Richard, and that could be really well done on screen if they do it right, because nobody knows who this real person was that came forth. But in the show, we know it really is the heir, the technical heir to the throne, challenging Henry, who is very insecure, like I talked about in the first cast, because his grandfather had an affair with the queen. He was a page at court. That's the Tudors' claim to the throne. It's barely there. They're grasping at straws. So the marriage to Lizzie of York is just pivotal because she has Plantagenet blood, which Plantagenets ran Europe until the Tudor reign. So he's going to do anything he can, and the emergence of a real York monarch would be a huge issue for him. And I was going through and looking for other events because from personal research, I already knew that Henry always had trouble, and that was one of my worries because obviously he won his crown through battle. He was the last person to do that. He was the last monarch to win his crown on the field of battle. But he was just unable to get anything going when he was actually king. There was constant indecision within his own court, and there was constant pacts being broken, which this carries on to his son. There's a lack of respect for him because even though he's marrying a York, even his son that ends up having more of a claim to the bloodline, we see Henry even having a lot of these issues of treaties being broken between Spain and France and so on. So I was looking for, because it is alluded to us that there is a rebellion just from the first trailer we get. So I'm looking at the timeline, and I'm placing this to be the Yorkshire 1489 rebellion. Parliament granted Henry a subsidy of £100,000 to help defend Brittany in its war against France. King Henry sent Henry Percy, the 4th Earl of Northumberland, to collect taxes to help raise more money for his campaign. However, many people in Northumberland and York claim they already paid their part through local taxes and were unwilling to give more money to defend the country because France was of no geographical threat to them. Yorkshire and Northumberland are in northern England. Brittany is closer to Cornwall and London. And also Yorkist loyalists are in the north. And they're not exactly too pumped to be giving out shillings to old King Henry VII because he killed their king. This is something that plagues Henry. A lot of times he wants to call to action and aid others, even in the Italian wars, and he's unable to. But the rebellion broke out because the Earl met with the rebels. A scuffle broke out. He was killed. The rebels then asked for a pardon, but were denied. The king sent a large army this time. He actually sent 8,000 to the north, led by the Earl of Surrey. So the rebels were, there was some skirmishes. They were defeated. The rebellion was put down, but this was a really shaky time. His whole reign is a real shaky time, but this was a time that he got to, even though he got shut down, to get the money he needed to aid in the war against France, which happens to him like 3 or 4 times. He was able to show some force here and accompany this along with the inner court turmoil. We could have a real interesting show. We could have that's 2 big events right there. We know that we will most likely see some action from Richard when he comes back. I'm hoping they do a time jump, like I said, but just the Princess in the Tower is interesting enough for me. And this rebellion, also the inner turmoil that's going to take place, and hopefully they do something interesting with this marriage. And it is said that they do end up loving each other, so I feel that if it's done right, and this is just me hoping the acting gets better or hoping I was wrong, which happens, we could have a good story. Arthur dies. It's pretty devastating. Lizzie dies after giving childbirth to Henry VIII. So there's a lot of deception within this court, and if done right, it could be really good. Because yes, the War of the Roses, like I said, was full of major battles. I guess you would consider a lot of them to be more skirmishes, but for the time, major battles. But if you think about it, it's not like the White Queen was just full of sword fights and epic battles by any means. But again, I was just drawn more in by the story. So I think that we mix in the Princess in the Tower, the return of Richard of York, and the Yorkshire Rebellion, which gets to see this is kind of like a rehashing of the War of the Roses anyways, and we could really have a good episode. So I just want to do a short cast, kind of being a little bit more positive and hope for the best, and that's all we can do. So if you haven't caught my Black Sails series, that's going on right now as well. I know it just ended, but I'm a big fan of it and think it deserves a lot more attention than it got. We really like you guys to go over to the YouTube channel, and we need support on the YouTube channel, and we have been getting it more and more every time, and we appreciate it. So just keep watching, keep listening, and subscribing, and we'll be able to do videos and stuff for you every time. This is the Vocalizer Network. I have people helping me on the blog side and stuff like that, but I'm a one-man team when it comes to the production and stuff like that. So we definitely need support on the YouTube channel for me to actually be able to put out full-fledged videos. So the more subs we get over there, that we can turn our interest over there. So I'd love to do it. And let's all hope for a good episode. We're only one day away from it. We had a bad one, but who knows? And again, go to vocalizershow.com and read some of the great blogs we have over there. Another way you can help is if you guys shop on Amazon whatsoever, which everybody does. We went and got our affiliate links, and why not? I figure that if people like the cast, we're not asking for Patreon money at this point, and we aren't monetized. So it would mean a lot. It's not going to bring in a bunch of money for us, but every cent counts. It makes it a little bit easier for us to put out more content, and I love doing this anyways, so it's not a big deal. I would never complain. If you're going to go and buy some of these books that I put for the source material and stuff like that, or just go to Amazon at all, just use my affiliate link. That's all it takes. So, again, I'm Justin Thomas. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys after episode 2.